You had mentioned again that other presidents endorsed the Balfour Declaration. Warren Harding, as an example, he endorses the Balfour Declaration, but historians note that he might not have been that popular among American Jews. So what's the dichotomy there in terms of support for the Balfour Declaration, but not a popular president in the view of American Jewry?
It's funny, indeed, in 1922, he signed the Lodge Fish Resolution, saying that the United States Congress supports, and the United States itself supports the Balfour Declaration. He also, interestingly enough, in the 1920 election, benefited from a surge of Jewish voting back at the time when most Jews did vote Republican, and he was a Republican. But he also supported immigration restrictions. He also didn't stand strong against Henry Ford and the Ku Klux Klan and the rise of anti-Semitism. And so one of the fascinating things we see with Harding is something that's playing out in many ways in the 21st century, is what does it mean to be a pro-Jewish president? Is being pro-Israel enough? Obviously, there wasn't an Israel at the time, but can you be pro-Israel and perhaps maybe against some of the cultural, political, domestic agendas of the Jewish community? And so Warren Harding, you could say grossly, is a kind of predecessor to the debate about Donald Trump. Was he good for the Jews? Was he bad for the Jews? Well, it depends on which perspective you take. Said he, very cleverly dodging the answer.
That's fine. That's fine. That's, we're talking about history and not necessarily Donald Trump and current politics. Herbert Hoover, post-presidency, finds himself supporting a Jewish homeland, something that he did or did not do as president. And this is something common that we see. One view when you're president, but another view when post-presidency.
When I was a freshman in college, and I was really struck by the question of what did my grandparents, who were living in Queens in the 1940s, know about the Holocaust? What did your typical American Jew, what did your typical American, what did the American president know about the Holocaust? I started looking into what was going on there, and I discovered this wacky novelist and screenwriter by the name of Ben Hecht, who ended up getting involved in something called the Committee for the Jewish Army, which was saying, wait a minute, if Jews are being attacked, and there isn't yet a Jewish state because it's before 1948, let's at least try to get a bunch of Jews to fight together to bring pride back to the word Jew. And lo and behold, there's the name of Herbert Hoover on these petitions. And Herbert Hoover's name keeps on popping up in the pre-state debate about establishing a Jewish state. Now, I grew up knowing that Herbert Hoover was the bad guy because Franklin Roosevelt was God. And all of a sudden, when we look at the 1940s, you see that Franklin Roosevelt is the one who's not letting Jews in, and Herbert Hoover is supporting the Jews. Let's go back. We forget, because Herbert Hoover was such a failure during the Great Depression, and Franklin Roosevelt cleverly ran against Herbert Hoover and won once, twice, three times, four times, even though Hoover was only in office the first time. Hoover was cast as kind of the incompetent villain. Before he became president, he was the great humanitarian. He was very involved in flood relief, in famine relief after World War I, which was just called the Great War then. And as part of his humanitarian orientation, he was in favor of the Jewish homeland. And even even when he was president, while he wasn't the most enthusiastic, he issued a number of statements, often invited by the Zionist Organization of America, which was a much more mainstream organization then, to support the Jews in Palestine. And most fascinatingly, in 1929, he condemned the anti-Jewish riots that the Palestinian Arabs pulled off against the Palestinian Israelis. In those days, they were called Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian Jews. And so what we actually see is, while pre and post he was more enthusiastic, he certainly has this orientation, understanding that it's a humanitarian issue, that giving the Jews a home after centuries of wandering and persecution is the right thing to do and is the obvious thing to do.